The I'm Fine podcast is produced by LaMore Media, L.L.C, and is run by Project Headspace and Timing. Project Headspace and Timing is a 501c3 that I started in 2017 after a veteran that I was a medic to decided to pull over on the side of the road and end his life. As an organization, Project Headspace and Timing works on veteran advocacy and veteran outreach. What that means is through the advocacy perspective, we try to connect veterans to other resources as early on into the process as possible. What that entails is early contact with veterans, forming a safety net with their family members, friends, and fellow service members, educating them on the resources, and when that veteran is ready to get help, we are there to make sure that they get the help that they need. The outreach aspect is put there to get veterans together to do productive and constructive things, whether it's out in nature, working with other businesses, anything to get them out around other veterans where those good conversations can happen if they want to have them. If you are interested in finding out more information about our organization, please visit projectheadspaceandtiming.org, our Facebook page, Project Headspace and Timing, or our Instagram, which is Project Headspace and Timing. And if you would like to donate to our organization, please visit our website, projectheadspaceandtiming.org, scroll to the bottom, and you will find a link to our Venmo. If you'd like to send us a check, our P.O. Box is P.O. Box 382, Manteno, Illinois, 60950. And if you'd like to sponsor or have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me at Eric P. as in Paul, at projectheadspaceandtiming.org. Thank you. Welcome to episode 9 of the I'm Fine podcast, where today we're going to talk about the most significant relationship around the holidays, which is the one that we have with food. Brad and I are going to talk about our history with food, struggles, what we dealt with as far as eating habits and things in the military versus afterwards. And then we're going to talk with eating psychologist Emily LaVoie.
Welcome to the I'm Fine podcast with your freaked out, insecure, neurotic, and emotional hosts, Eric Peterson and Brad Stozick.
So you were just talking about how much you love Thanksgiving, and I was going to ask you before the episode started recording, but I was like, I'm going to wait. What's your favorite food that you eat at Thanksgiving?
Green bean casserole.
That's not a bad one. That's
man, I love it.
That's one of the ones where it's weird if I feel like eat it any other time of year. It just doesn't feel right. But Thanksgiving, like, it's solid. The other thing that's just like that, but for me, stuffing. But cheap 99-cent stuffing.
Oh,
I don't give a fuck. Yeah. That's even better than the regular than homemade sometimes to me. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So that leads us pretty well into, Brad and I have been fat. We've had issues with food. We've had problems. We've had struggles. A lot of people do, right? Especially around the holidays.
Yes.
My upbringing was a little bit different than yours, I think, in that, my mom being Filipino in a Filipino household, when it comes to food, there was always like a rice cooker. Rice was with every single meal. And then if you ever go to any Filipino anything, if you don't eat food there, if they offer you food and you don't eat it, that is like the biggest, infraction that you could, or the worst thing that you could do. Like, you have to eat everywhere you go. They just want to keep feeding you. And so I had a lot of that when I was little. I didn't really eat a lot of TV dinners, Lunchables, like that type of stuff. My mom would make Filipino food or some degree of that. And it was always that. Fast food was not really too often. We didn't really eat that much, much at all. But what was it like for you growing up?
Man. So my mom worked quite a bit, a lot.
Right.
So we would have our one family dinner on Sunday. That would be like our big dinner. And it was weird because what we ate, it was buttered egg noodles, kielbasa sausage, a mixture of whole kernel corn and cream style corn, And then on the side, so that's all mixed together on top of each other. And then on the side, you have 4% Dean's cottage cheese, the light blue lid. If it's not that one, you're wrong.
Yep.
And applesauce. Dude, it's so good.
Like the applesauce throws me off like a little bit. The rest of that just sounds like a Midwestern version of the KFC bowl.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's pretty much what
just
it was.
A bunch of stuff in one little place.
It was either that or we had taco night where we would have like just a circle of vegetables.
Yeah.
So I never thought this was weird because we did it growing up, but I would put cucumbers and black olives on my tacos. And apparently that's strange.
I don't think the black olives is, I really don't think either is that weird. Cucumber is just kind of tasteless. It's just there for like crunch. The black olives are pretty good. I don't think that's that weird.
Yeah.
But did you ever have struggles with like weight and weight loss? And if so, like when did that start? Was it early on, later in life?
Oh, dude, I've always been kind of chunky. I'll never forget this. I think it was like 6th grade, 5th grade, somewhere around there. And my pant size was like a 13 husky.
At what age?
Like 13.
I don't
maybe
even
12.
What's normal?
11. I don't know. Somewhere around in that range of like preteen weird. So 13 husky. And somebody saw that and they're like, "Oh, your pants are husky."
Yeah, that's a shitty thing to call.
I was like, "Damn."
Size. Like this one's husky. The next one is ugh.
Yeah, right.
The size just UUGH.
I know. Like, I was just like, man.
For a little kid too.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've just always been pudgy. One time my cousin just squeezed my belly once and it just looked like a little
donut.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, hey, that happens. I was always a little bit bigger. I wasn't like really big or anything, but I definitely had a lot of issues with like my body image.
Yeah.
And that never stopped to this day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that when I was in the military and when I did private contracting, like the hardest thing for me was just hold myself accountable to like a diet. Because when it comes to fitness, like I've always loved working out. Like the gym is my haven, my safe place. But like as far as dieting is concerned, it's always been something that like I've tried a lot of and I've had some success and then like I would gain it all back or like whatever. But when I was in the military, it was the easiest. And when I was overseas with the State Department DOD, it was the easiest because every day you go to the chow hall and it's all right there.
Yep.
I don't got to do any fucking meal prep. Fuck out of here. You know what I mean? I just show up, chicken, broccoli, rice, moving on. And then I'll pack a little one for to go so I can have my, 5 square meals a day or whatever. And then it's easy, to lose that weight, but it just gets so much harder when I get home.
Yes.
I think maybe because of all the responsibilities of life and everything else that I don't necessarily have to dedicate time to.
I would agree with
when
that.
I'm overseas. You know what I mean? And you see guys when they get out, they gain weight. You know what I mean? Like present company included. Have you put on, what do the Marines have? Because in the Army, it's Class A uniform. What did you guys have? What do you call them? Your blues or
like our dress blues or your dress blues, Charlie's. Right? Yeah, your dress blues.
Do you still fit into your top?
Dude, no.
Is it funny when you put it on?
You can hear it cry. If I look at it, you can hear it like the seams like.
I feel like Chris Farley and Tommy Boy.
Yeah.
Fat guy to little coat.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Like every once in a while I'll put that on. My field jacket still fits though.
Dude.
For some reason. But my Class A uniform, I was like, no, man. I was like a size 32 waist. I think when I was born, I was like a 34. like that shit, that blows my fucking mind.
Yeah, dude.
So when I got out, I tried keto. I tried, what were the other ones? What were the ones that you tried that you were telling me about? Atkins, that was before keto, I guess.
I don't know. It didn't really have a name. It was just like my buddy's dad did it to prepare for a bodybuilding competition.
Yeah.
So it was pretty much just high protein, low carb. And that's pretty much what it was.
Yeah. So what were the biggest issues that you'd had that you were talking about as far as like your own body image?
Like I said, I've always just been the pudgy, and I've always tried, like I tried the fad diets, when I did that diet, I've just always been a little bit extra. I always compare myself to like like if someone bit a marshmallow and then if you drop it, so it's kind of hairy, a little bit squishy, really white. And that's what I look like if I take my shirt off.
I'm going to think of that next time I see a marshmallow. Every time I see marshmallows.
Hey man, you want to go swimming next summer?
Dude. What does that have to do with the other part? All All right, man. All right. That's fine.
I'm not
think that when I don't know why it was I had such issues with my own body image, but I'll say that I think a big part of it was because, one, I already look different from everybody else. You know what I mean? So already I'm just like, all right, what do I gotta fit in. What do I do to fit in? And then for me, losing weight was always difficult just because, I don't know, I just liked eating a lot. Like my mom made super good food all the fucking time. Like it's amazing that I'm only as big as I am. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But I never really ate a lot of that shitty food. And then, having kids, it's so important for them to understand what their relationship with food is.
Yes.
That they're not eating super shitty food all the time. But that's so difficult to do too, because kids don't want to eat healthy food because chocolate exists and like cookies and stuff and pizza, you know what I mean? And all that stuff tastes better than broccoli. But my kids will eat carrots pretty good, corn, and then they've tried like bell pepper and they thought it was pretty good. But other than that, or sweet peppers, but that's really it. Are your kids pretty good?
Yeah, they're broccoli, carrots, green beans.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're typical. I do the tough guy dad. Like you're not getting up till everything's off your plate.
You do that?
Because, dude, that's how I was raised, man. It was an Italian family. Like whatever's on your plate, that's what you're eating.
Like I don't know how it doesn't work in my family because when I tell my daughters that, they're just like, no. And then I'm like, you can do that? You can say that to me? Like, I don't think I ever once said no to either my mom or my dad because I was terrified on what would happen if I said no. Both of my kids are like, no. And my Lily will say no. And then Cece's like, double no. And like spits on the floor. Like slaps me in the face. That's how I feel like with daughters.
Have you ever had an argument? I think there's a video somewhere on Facebook or something where I'm arguing with Gavin, where I say, Gavin, eat your broccoli. He goes, no broccoli. And I go,
how old was he?
Probably like 3, maybe.
Holy shit.
And I go, Gavin, eat your broccoli. And no broccoli.
He's standing up to the old man already at 3.
Yep.
That's why, like, my oldest wasn't like that, but my youngest, she's just like a little samurai Viking 300 warrior. She's just the Kool-Aid man kicking in walls everywhere she fucking goes. It's amazing. But yeah, but both of them are like fairly good eaters. Like my kids are pretty good eaters. I think if they eat a couple of vegetables, I'm happy as long as they're not eating processed stuff all the time and, just that kind of bullshit. But I grew up eating some of that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Not too much though. What about you?
I had a lot of that in my house growing up.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of that. So like I said, my mom worked a lot. So she worked Tuesday, Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
On those nights, my dad would do like quick TV dinner. You know what I mean? Real quick. So that already processed, not really good. And then on the nights my mom was home, we had some kind of practice or something. So it was like the quick hamburger helper, just add a pound of ground beef.
Yeah.
And that was dinner. So there was a lot of that. So I think to cover for that, dude, my mom would go grocery shopping and just have at least 2 carts full of just snacks and cereal. But dude, it was all me. It wasn't it was a little bit my sisters, but it was mostly me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But when you were in the Marines, you got super stupid hardcore with it though, didn't you? Like as far as dieting and stuff, didn't you tell me?
I did. Yeah. So my body type doesn't agree with the Marine Corps' weight standards.
Yeah.
So my maximum weight for my height was 175 pounds.
So do you have to get taped? Is that what they do? Because I would have to get taped.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I would do before that, so about maybe 3-4 days before I knew I had to weigh in, I would stop drinking water. I would stop eating. I would put probably anywhere from 3 to 7 layers of hoodies and sweatpants and garbage bags, and I would wrap myself in saran wrap. But before I wrap myself, I would put Preparation H on my stomach.
Yeah, dude.
Then wrap myself, and dude, I would run on the treadmill, and then I would sit in the sauna, and I would just dehydrate the crap out of myself for 4 days. Just try Epsom salt.
Oh yeah.
Like laxatives, dude. You name it. I did it. It was awful. But you know what? I made weight every time.
Oh, but you still, and in doing that, you made weight.
Every time.
Okay. See, I never even close to made weight, so I was always getting taped. But I would pass my PT test, but I would fail tape because I've always just been, I don't know, wider.
Yep.
You know what I mean? But your diet was also on point back then too, right?
I mean, it was. I mean, I worked in the chow hall, so I had access to all of it. So I mean, it was a lot better than it is today. Yes.
Yeah, and that's why I don't know what makes it so hard for you to keep on with any sort of diet or any sort of change nutritionally to your life. Like, why is that so hard for you?
I think I'm just lazy when it comes to like prepping my food and preparing it and having it ready to go and cooking it, and it's a process. I just want it. I'm that generation where it's like I want it now.
Yeah,
and I think that's my struggle.
Yeah, I definitely think it's pretty hard, especially because when you're doing, and not to make excuses, but I'm going to make an excuse anyway. So when you're working and you're going to school and you're raising several kids and like all this other shit, and you finally get, you know, that 30 minutes here or there, like, do you want to do something? Like, nope. You want to sit down and just turn my brain off for like 30 minutes and do nothing. You know what I mean? So I think that makes it really hard too.
It does.
But the person that we are going to have on today, her name is Emily LaVoie. She's an eating psychologist. We heard about her on episode 49 of the Kankakee podcast with Jake LaMore. It was an amazing episode. I really got a lot out of it. Like, I found a lot of things down there super interesting. So I'm excited to have her on here just to kind of like pick away at some of these questions. And I know you have some questions. What did you think when you heard about her?
I was crazy. I loved it because it was a new science. I didn't know that was a thing.
Right.
So I was super pumped when I heard about it. Yeah.
You wouldn't think about it at all. And then all of a sudden, like when I started like looking into it and I heard the podcast, I was like, yeah, it seems pretty fucking necessary.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
But yeah, so we are going to come back with Emily LaVoie, eating psychologist, here in like now. And we are back here with Emily LaVoie, eating psychologist, to talk to her about a lot of the questions that Brad and I had after listening to some of the podcasts that she's been on. She was on episode 49 of the Kankakee podcast here with Jake LaMore. I also saw the Well Within Reach podcast. Is that with Riverside? But yeah, Emily, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
I'm happy and honored. Thank you for having me.
Yes, and even though you started to feel like a little bit of a cough or whatever, and I'm getting over one and I sound terrible, like, I appreciate you venturing out here to get this done with us. But before we get into it too much, like, as far as context is concerned, you know, if anyone's out there and you really want to get a more comprehensive look on, you know, what made Emily get into this, you know, episode 49 of the Kankakee podcast and the Well Within Reach, I thought really talked about that. But while that's important to us, we really wanted to get into some of the things that you do and the questions that we had from listening to those episodes, if that's okay. But before I get to that, I wanted to ask why you felt that eating psychology was so important. Because from my perspective, when I didn't know what it was, which was up until I listened to that last episode of the Kankakee podcast, when I realized what it was, it made so much sense why it needed to exist. And then I was so confused on why it didn't exist before or why I wasn't familiar with it. Yep. You know what I mean? So what's your opinion on why eating psychology is so important?
So just a little bit of a background. I'll try to keep it in a nutshell. Yeah. My original background was from the fitness industry. I got into personal training and group fitness, and then kind of ventured into nutrition as a wellness coach. And I was kind of drawn to those fields because of my own disordered relationship with food, disordered relationship with, I like to use the word movement, but exercise and fitness, and disordered body image is what originally drew me to that. Because I was, I guess, trying to like be perfect, if you will.
Right.
I love helping people. I'm like a people helper at heart. So, what was your original question?
Yeah, just why eating psychology is so important.
So I feel like when I would help a person with nutrition, as a wellness coach back when I was working in the fitness industry, and I would run into them at the grocery store again, after working with them for a little while. I'd be like, oh, hey, so and so, how is it going? It's great to see you. How's everything going with the nutrition stuff? And they would typically just kind of like shake their head no. And like, oh, I know what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm just not doing it. I know what I should eat, but I'm not doing it. I can't do it. Which really resonated with me because I'm like, yeah, I know what I should be eating too,
Right.
and I'm not doing it. But then when I don't do it, I put so much like guilt and shame and try to like compensate for something that I ate the next day. And I happened to stumble across this advertisement for the Institute for the Psychology of Eating, and it said like help people improve their relationship with food, and I was like, relationship with food, like, oh my gosh, we have a relationship with food and mine is horrible, like so bad. This is what not only like I probably need, but like literally the majority of everybody that I know probably doesn't have a great relationship with food in one way or the other because they have a poor body image or they're on and off diets or weight cycling constantly. So
And I had that aha moment too, just because it made so much sense. Like when you ask somebody, how's it going? How's your nutrition and things like that? And they're like, ugh. You know what I mean? Like that's why they're saying it. I feel like because they don't have an understanding of their relationship with food. And I didn't understand that having a relationship with food was even a thing.
Nope.
You know what I mean? Because I had a pretty bad relationship with food.
Yep. I only knew the negative ones, like the like the negative, the ones that talk
Because you don't even think about it.
No.
And obviously we're not alone. One of the points that you brought up in one of those podcasts was about how dieting causes weight gain.
Mhm.
And I found, a couple of small things. Scientific American research suggests that roughly 80% of people who shed a significant portion of their body fat will not maintain that degree of weight loss for 12 months. And the dieters regain on average more than half of what they lose within 2 years. I feel like anybody that I know that diets would say that. They would say, yeah, like me personally, I did keto for like a while and it worked. I lost weight. And then I love bread more than I love sweets, more than I love anything. I love fresh bread.
bread is life.
Yeah.
It's life. And so when eventually I started eating keto again, and then a few months later, I was back to where I was pretty much. You know what I mean?
Actually, like the research shows that I think like at the 5-year mark, 66% of people will end up weighing more than they did before they started dieting. And most of the research is more like 95 to 97% of diets fail.
And I feel like a majority of that is because it has to be because of eating psychology. I know it's like a ton of other variables, but understanding the relationship that you have with food has to affect so much else, because the parallels that I draw to my life is my relationship with the gym. Because when I started thinking about my relationship to food, I was thinking about my relationship to fitness. And so my relationship to the gym has been, I've always loved going to the gym, because it was one thing that when you were deployed, no matter where you were, there was a gym, that was your time. And so early on, it was kind of just instilled in my brain, like, hey, the gym is your time. Like you get to enjoy your place there. You talk to some people and they're like, ugh, I hate going to the gym.
Yep.
I'm so glad that I don't feel that way. But then I don't have any sort of, when you do that, you make the gym such a positive place, you're going to want to go there. You're going to improve that relationship, right? But with food, like I don't even think about it at all. You know what I mean?
I would say like your relationship with the gym, you enjoy that time so much because you see the benefits, like how maybe it benefits your mental health, or when you're deployed, being at the gym was a place you were comforted, and it felt I don't know, maybe not lonely, or kind of in a way like feels like quote unquote home.
Right.
It's something that you have everywhere, even when you're so far from home. Yeah, but some people have a horrible relationship with the gym because that's something that they do when they're trying to lose weight. So it's like a very punishing relationship.
Right.
Other people, it stems back to like, I got picked last by, the dodgeball team.
Yep.
And that makes perfect sense too.
Right.
It doesn't matter why. But yeah, I also help people sometimes if they're struggling with their relationship with movement, like we can work in that area as well.
That's awesome. Which leads to your first question.
Yeah. Let me get my giant notebook here. So this podcast, obviously, we deal a lot with like mental health and stuff. So how could eating psychology and how would that go hand in hand with mental health? Would you say?
Yeah, so our relationship with food impacts so many areas of our life. It can impact our relationship with movement and can impact our body image. And I like to kind of say, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Like, do you have a bad relationship with food and then you had a bad relationship with your body? Or did you have a bad relationship like with your body first, which led you to having a bad relationship with food? So everything is so related and seeps into other areas of your life, because if you're struggling with your relationship with food, that could lead into your social life.
Right.
Like I don't want to go out to this restaurant because they don't have any like quote unquote safe foods that I can eat. Or if you're struggling with, a relationship with food, that could also kind of turn into problems in your relationship with a partner. Like I've had clients tell me, like, I don't feel comfortable being intimate with my partner. I'm unhappy with my body. I don't want my partner to see my body, or have rules like my partner can't touch me here or the lights have to be off. But yeah, it spills into so many areas of life.
When you see like now the movement where I guess the body positivity movement, I think, was that the correct terminology? As far as seeing people that wouldn't typically be associated with being fit or whatever the case may be, but they're very proud of their bodies. I think that that's something that's really important. But personally, the struggle that I have is like, but at some point also like health comes into mind, right? Like there has to be some sort of health component here as far as being proud. I mean,
I love this question.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't even know if you asked the question, but I know.
I sort of did. I just kind of feel like a dick asking that question that way. You know what I mean? Because you feel like I'm not. There has to be a line somewhere. Health is also important. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So with that,
Yeah. So there is something called Health at Every Size. The acronym is HAES, HAES. And it's a framework, and kind of like it's a book, but also a worldwide movement. And it basically, it's so hard to explain, like very complex things. It says that like body diversity is very real. So like it's kind of off subject, but like we're well aware that like skin comes in a large variety of colors and bodies come in a large range of heights, and noses are different and teeth are different and belly buttons are different. This is diversity, but like weight, size, and shape fits into diversity as well, which is kind of against what the stupid BMI chart tries to say.
Oh my God. Yeah. I think it's been the bane of my existence my entire life. Sorry.
Yeah. Yes. I hate that thing.
So Health at Every Size kind of acknowledges that, we are designed to have a large range of body sizes. It is and always has been a part of the human species and body diversity. And what is more actually healthy, because it's evidence-based, tons of research backing it up, that we have more success at improving health markers, both like physical health markers such as cholesterol, blood pressure, all of those things, and improving our mental health when we focus on health promoting behaviors and let go of focusing on weight loss. And for some people, weight loss happens as a side effect, but that doesn't happen for everybody. Some people's bodies stay exactly the same. Some people, when they start adopting healthy behaviors, they'll actually gain weight, but their health will improve regardless.
Sure. Well, I think about when I quit and my wife, when we both quit smoking cigarettes, our diets changed and we gained a little bit of weight.
Yep.
But it was a good thing. You know what I mean? That instance, you know what I mean? But one of the, like, you said a few things that I thought were incredibly interesting. I think this was on the Kankakee podcast, but one of the biggest aha moments I had listening to you was the importance of like being conscious about your eating, like just paying attention to the fact that you're eating in the moment, not eating unconsciously.
Oh, yeah.
So I love that so much because that was another thing that I didn't even think about until in the moment. I feel like so much of the time when I'm eating, I'm doing other stuff.
Oh, okay. Yeah, like multitasking
Yes,
with food.
I'm like watching TV. I'm doing homework.
Which is okay, but it can kind of take us away from the pleasure and enjoyment of food, which is part of what contributes to like being satisfied by food. So if we're not getting like that enjoyment and pleasure piece, which falls into like a category called cephalic phase digestion, to get a little bit fancy, and that helps to lead to satisfaction. So if we're watching TV instead of like really paying attention to the taste, flavors, textures, temperature of food, and receiving that enjoyment and pleasure, we might like keep going and keep eating and eating and eating, because our body's still like looking for the pleasure and enjoyment, but we're not paying attention to it. We're paying, attention to whatever it is we're watching.
And it seems like so much as far as mental health is concerned revolves around the idea of just being super mindful. Like being very present and in the moment, paying attention to this thing that I'm doing right now and trying to block out a lot of the external stimuli, right? Especially when you're doing something like eating, because eating unconsciously was like one of the things that I was doing the most that I stopped doing. And I was telling you about it and you were like, yeah, I stopped doing it too. Just because you're sitting there and it's like, I don't eat for serving size. I eat for time. I feel like if I'm sitting there watching TV and I eat out of boredom, that's my habit.
That's like great awareness. You were saying like so much of mental health. Yeah, it's like having awareness,
right?
And being able to like just pause. And pause doesn't mean stop. You can push play again, but just pausing and like analyzing your thoughts. Where are these thoughts coming from? What are the thoughts? What emotions am I feeling right now? Is there a way that I can help these more negative emotions pass quicker? So I like to call that like my what tools can I pull out of my toolbox?
Well, that's always better than making yourself feel like shit for doing something. You know what I mean? Because I feel like when you just make yourself feel super bad about, because you're in the back of your mind, like we were talking earlier, you're like, I can't have a Twinkie. I know how bad it is. I can never eat one ever. And then you eat one and you're like, I'm a piece of shit. And then boom, whole box gone. Like on to the next one. You know what I mean? And I feel it's like part of that's because you're making yourself feel bad about it. Whereas it seems like your perspective is kind of taking that energy and just guiding it and just saying like, listen, if you want to do that, it's okay within reason, within a host of variables and other things. It's just being aware about it and not making yourself feel terrible because that may lead to an increase in failure.
Yeah, like telling yourself not to have a Twinkie or not to have anything is, it's not, in intuitive eating, we call it unconditional permission to eat, which means like I can eat whatever I want, whenever I want, with any ingredients I want, in any quantity that I want.
That sounds
that's
dangerous.
Unconditional, but that's like kind of the definition. So if we're saying like you can't have foods X, Y, and Z, it's like telling a kid not to push a button. Like they really can't think of anything except the thing they're not supposed to be doing. So I'm so excited to be having this conversation.
Nice.
As humans, this actually could really relate to like being in the military. And I have a really cool research study I can't tell you about. Oh my gosh, all of the things.
Get it.
So when we like tell ourselves we can't have something, inside of our body, what happens is not that much different from an anatomical standpoint as like going into like starvation or a famine.
Really?
Yeah. And so like our body is genetically and biologically, like in our DNA, our body is designed to like withstand famine. And this is part of why diets fail, because our body is like designed, like when we go on a diet, we don't really know, our body doesn't know like, oh my gosh, am I stuck in a cave, like
Right.
starving, or are we like putting ourselves like self-inflicted famine? Our body doesn't know. Our body is just trying to survive and do what it's like so perfectly designed to do.
Yeah. So what is your feelings then behind like things like intermittent fasting? What is your opinion on doing things like that? Is that because my interpretation of it, as far as why it made sense, was because it seemed like you were giving, some of your organs a rest, essentially, because you weren't just always eating all the time. But I've also heard that your metabolism's like a fire and you have to keep throwing into it. So I'm like, so what, it feels like those are very conflicting for me, and I'm trying to figure out which one fits best to me. But,
Right. So what I help people do is like tune back into how their body communicates its needs and wants, so that they know how to listen and then meet their body's needs and wants. So let me give you an example. Okay, say you have to pee. Like when your bladder stretches, that signals a message to be sent to your brain, like get yourself up and go to the bathroom. And you feel that signal happen, and you just get up and excuse yourself and go use the restroom.
Right.
And you don't feel like guilty about it or shameful about it, or you don't have to wait till your Apple Watch tells you that it's okay to go to the bathroom, and you don't have to like measure it out on a scale to know it's the exact
with a little
correct
journal that
grams.
you can carry with you.
You don't have to plug it into MyFitnessPal or anything like that.
I think it's an idea for an app.
Yeah.
maybe.
So like we just, like I said, we don't, as humans, we don't do well with food restriction or food rules. And so like intermittent fasting, the food rule is like, you can eat during these times, but not during this time, which is a form of restriction. Because what if you get hungry and your window has closed, and then
Right.
you just have to be hungry and you're not allowed to eat? And if you eat, you're breaking like the quote unquote rule. That's a form of restriction. And I also feel like a lot of people, regardless of what they say, get into intermittent fasting with the hope of, I'm going to do this thing and, like you said, like let my organs rest, but I also really hope that it will help me lose weight. Like
Sure.
I think that's like back there in people's minds. So if the goal is ever weight loss, it's a diet. And 95% of them fail. So this is really cool to think about, because I know a lot of people like, oh, diets fail 95 to 97% of the time. Okay, I get that. That's like really horrible odds, but I'm going to do it. I think I can be that like 5 to 3%. Like I know I can do it. I'm going to be that really small percentage that succeeds. It's just so interesting to me that like that's how our brain works with diets. But if I said like, hey, you're getting on a flight tomorrow, sorry to tell you, there's like only a 5 to 3% chance your flight's going to make it to your destination.
Holy shit.
Everybody would be like, hell no, I'm not. That's way too risky.
Yeah.
I will not survive. I'm not getting on that flight. But like, why do our brains say like, no, I will be the success dieter?
I'm going to give up carbs completely for the rest of my life.
I've almost done that. I did that for 3 months. I didn't eat any carbs.
I didn't eat any carbs for quite a while, and part of the reason I had such a horrible relationship with food stems from that, which is like diet culture.
Awful.
Which is a complex, yeah.
I mean, I looked amazing though. I looked like a Greek god, dude. It was incredible.
That's interesting that like I would say when I looked my quote unquote healthiest, I was absolutely my most, and I was receiving tons of compliments, tons of praise. People were asking me what I was doing, but I was the worst health I've ever been. And I mean like physical health, mental health, emotional health, well-being. I was like everything was being flushed down the toilet. It was horrible.
Really?
With that, why is that? Why? And I ask because I didn't experience that. Like I was in pretty good shape when I was in the military. That was about it. But how was it that you were at the peak of physical perfection to the outsider, yet you were so miserable at the same time?
So for me, that time kind of coincided with the end of a relationship.
Oh, yeah.
And so like my mental health was just in a bad place because of that and some other just like personal stuff that was going on. And so, yeah, it impacted, all of that stuff impacted me. Like there was a lot of my life that felt like it was out of control. And so what happens for a lot of people who struggle with disordered eating/eating disorders, when one area of your life feels kind of out of your control, you like strangle, grasp onto the things that you have control over. So like diet culture tells us we have control over food and control over our body. So I just like put so much focus and energy into that, which I really can look back now and kind of say like, at the time, that was a coping tool that maybe helped me survive, because I could have turned to something more dangerous like alcohol or drugs or gambling or just something more harmful. So I feel like it served a purpose, but it's not a place you can just like live forever. So like when that, it's a lot of times like in the eating disorder field, we compare it to like a winter coat in a cold, windy day. It will save your life and it's comforting and you need it, but you don't need it in the summer. Like you have to be able to take it off. Otherwise, it could kill you in the summer.
Right.
And so like if you're struggling with, we sometimes we turn to unhealthy coping tools, but then we have to be able to leave them behind. So I guess all of that to say like, I'm glad I was able to overcome it, because it probably would have taken my life eventually, because eating disorders kind of fluctuate back and forth. In the field of psychology, we love to keep statistics and analyze data. And so the DSM-5, the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual, we're on the 5th edition. They track like how many people got diagnosed with this, that, and the other this year. How many people died of this, that, and the other this year. So really often it fluctuates back and forth between eating disorders were the most deadly mental health condition, hard stop, versus opioid addiction. Those two kind of take turns causing the most deaths.
I would never think that. Like, I would never think that eating disorders were that prevalent. You know what I mean? Just because common sense is common experience.
Yeah.
I didn't have that type of relationship, so I didn't understand. Like, I never understood that that's how it was.
Yep.
So can I tell you about this really cool study?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm probably going to butcher it. So people who know more about this study, like I'm apologizing in advance. I think it was World War II, I think. And so people who, obviously there's a lot of people who don't want to go to war when it's like wartime. Okay, so this is a really old study. I have to preface that typically in the field of research and medicine and science, we don't really like to like lean on super outdated research.
Right.
But because ethics have changed in the field of research, this type of study can never be recreated because it's very unethical. So we talk about this old study all of the time, and it was done very, very well. It was very controlled. So yeah, even though it's old, we still talk about it a lot. And it's called the Minnesota Starvation Experiment.
Ugh.
And so some of these guys who didn't want to go to, I think, World War II could not go, but they had to like enter themselves into being part of this research study to, the point was, I think they knew that people at war were being starved or not getting enough food. So they wanted to figure out what is the best way when these men who haven't been eating enough at war come back to refeed them. And so they had to like starve some people so that they could then figure out how to refeed. Anyway, so these starved, and they weren't like, I think when we think of starving, we think of like no food, period. I hate to use like numbers because it's very, very triggering for people with eating disorders. But I think these men were eating like somewhere around 1,700 calories a day. And that was considered starvation. So like starvation is not like not eating at all. It's like starvation is just like eating less than enough, or even just slightly less than enough. And like all of these men, oh my gosh, the laundry list of things that started struggling in their lives. They like hyper fixated on food. Like they thought about food nonstop all day long. There wasn't YouTube back then, but like they basically read recipe books all day, every day. And they would try to, like, when they were eating the food that they were allowed to eat that wasn't enough, they'll like cut it up into the itsy bitsy teeny tiniest bites and like eat it so slow so their eating experience could stretch out like longer. All they ever talked about was food. A lot of them ended up dropping out because it was just like they were all experiencing severe anxiety, severe depression. A lot of them were struggling with like suicidal ideation. All of them, like no sex drive, zero, like because not eating enough really impacts your hormones. So like testosterone tanked.
Oh,
yeah. So men eat food if you want to have a sex drive, right?
Yeah.
If we gotta. You know,
I mean,
Fine.
I was gonna say, you don't have to twist my arm too hard. I guess I'll have
more.
to.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, and so then like when the starvation, quote unquote starvation, period of the experiment was over and they were allowed to start eating again, they ate like way more than enough, kind of to compensate for the restrictive period. It's like, and it took, for some months, but for some people it took years to get back to like where the pendulum was swinging back in the normal range because the starvation, it's hard for me to explain this without my hands. Like envision a hand reaching into a clock and like grabbing the pendulum and cranking it way back, like not getting enough. And then when you release it, it's not just going to stop back in the normal range. It's got to swing just as much the opposite direction. Like, so I have to eat too much kind of to make up for what I didn't eat then, but then also to like repair the mental damage that was done by, it's called, what is it called? Food insecurity.
That was a great fucking analogy too.
Yeah.
Never thought about it like that.
No,
But do
crazy.
people that are like today in the military ever experience food insecurity? Like if they're out in the field of combat?
I've never been in combat. I actually did self-inflicted of that.
Dieting. Okay, got it.
If you will, because I always the Marine Corps wanted you to be a certain weight. I always was pretty close to it.
I mean, it's harmful in and of itself. Just saying, like, okay, we don't have any room for body diversity.
Yeah.
Or do you guys eat those like
MREs?
Yeah, because like that's
delicious.
Probably they are delicious, but probably not enough food for. I mean, maybe some people would want like 2 or 3.
There's a solid amount of calories in them.
Yeah, I think
I don't know how much. Like,
I think each
2,000
MRE is
or
like 2,000 to
something.
3,000.
Okay, so
in
like
one
usually
MRE.
if you guys were eating them, or most people who would eat them feel like full and satisfied?
Usually I would have just depended on the amount of work that we were doing because, I mean, the more work that I was doing, the hungrier that I would be, I guess.
Correct.
But like you talk about body diversity, I went to, in the Army, they call it L.L.C, Warriors Leaders Course. So when you are going to get promoted to a sergeant, you'll go to this course, you'll do all this stuff, and then, you'll get your promotion or something. Whenever it becomes available. So I went and I finished at the top of my class. So there's multiple classes and you're graded on all these things. And so I go up in front of the E7 who's in charge of our class, and he was just like, "Hey, I just want you to know you're in the top of the class. You're up for what they call Soldier of the Cycle. You're going to come up in front of this board of guys. They're going to sergeants or officers or whoever, and they're going to ask you all these questions. And then if you answer them correctly, you're going to be Soldier of the Cycle." And he goes, and the staff sergeant told me, "But you're overweight, so you're not going to get it." But I passed everything else, like the physical fitness test, all that other stuff. I've always been a stockier dude. I'm the kind of guy that'll pick people up and carry them. Like, that's been my thing. And so, like, I did that well at everything else. And I just asked him, I was like, "Can I just not be up for this then if I can't get
Good
it?"
call.
And he was just like, "No, because of how it works, like because you finished so high in all these things, I still had to walk up in front of this board, answer all these stupid ass questions."
Yep.
And then I knew I wasn't going to win anyway
Yeah,
because I
like
was too fat.
asking to not be in it is like a form of self-protection, right?
Right. Yeah. Like, why would I do that to myself? Because I know I'm not going to win. You know what I mean? So yeah, and in the so for me, I was a grunt. I was infantry the first time, and then a medic the other 5. But
that doesn't sound like a grunt to me.
the grunt, well, infantry the first time is just grunts, and for us, and in that environment, if you are semi overweight, like even close, like the guys are going to be on you. You know what I mean? They're going to be watching you as you eat, watching every single thing you do in the chow hall.
Which is like prescribing anorexia.
And I never thought about that because I was so unfamiliar with anorexia. Like I always knew what it was, but because my problem was more overweight, I didn't even understand how bad of an issue anorexia is because it's way more prevalent than people understand, right?
Oh yeah.
So yeah, but there was a lot of that in the military. Like guys would make you feel like
something
shit.
Kind of related that is, so it's called atypical anorexia, but it's actually far more common and it happens way more often than regular anorexia, so non-atypical anorexia. So in the DSM-5, there's different categories of like if a person is struggling with A, B, and C, then they're diagnosed with anorexia. And one of those criteria is like their BMI is below the like quote unquote normal healthy range. And so atypical anorexia is basically a person who meets all of the other criteria. Their relationship with food is horrible, but their BMI is just not low. But just as serious and just as harmful, but like they're never getting a diagnosis, which means they're never getting help.
Yeah.
And since it's more, it should actually be called like not atypical because it's more common than having the like emaciated body.
I faced the same issue in the Marine Corps, except I wasn't a grunt. Like in the Army, I guess only grunts face it, but in the Marine Corps, it's the entire Marine Corps. So I was a cook.
Oh, sure.
I was a cook, and there was one point, I don't remember how often it was. You do your weigh-ins and stuff. Well, if you don't make weight, they put you on what's called BCP, which is Body Composition Platoon. And you have to PT during lunch. You have to PT early in the morning. You have to PT after work. And
which is just going to increase your appetite.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like doing more harm than good.
Yep.
Because if you were able to shrink your body and meet like the criteria that they want you to be, like some people are at their healthiest just naturally. Like I guess you would say they're the quote unquote lucky people that their body diversity falls in the acceptable range. But if a person who lives in a larger body is being like held to those same criteria and standards, they're going to have to not eat. Like they're going to have to eat less than enough, or basically like, prescribed, anorexia. So if they did somehow shrink their body down to like the quote unquote acceptable size, their health would decline. And like they wouldn't be as good, like especially if they were in an active, like if they were, they wouldn't be able to defend our country as well.
Yep.
Right.
I could speak. There was one, I was telling Eric before you came, there was one weekend where I was trying to make weight. I think I lost somewhere between 12 and 17 pounds of water weight in 3 days to try to make weight.
And were you like a basket case?
Oh, dude. Yeah, it was awful. It was awful. I went to medical and she took my blood pressure and was doing all the vitals and stuff. And she's like, Are you okay?
Like dehydrated?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, I haven't eaten or drinking anything in like 4 days. And I would do
How do they not see that as like harmful?
I don't know.
See, it almost seems like they're more concerned about the perception of, we don't want you to actually perform well. We just want you to look scary.
I mean, sometimes depending on your job, looking scary is a good portion of it. Sometimes.
I mean, I just like made omelets and stuff, so I don't know.
I used to compete, not for a very long time, but just for a little bit of time in amateur strongman competitions. And so making weight was a big deal because in the amateur strongman community, you might be walking around at 260, but you want to compete at the 242 class. So you're going to get down to that 242 by any means necessary. And I would hear and I would see guys doing that same thing. And the day of weigh-in, everybody's miserable. Like that's the day to piss somebody off. Like everyone's just waiting or almost passing out.
Yeah, it sounds a lot like wrestling, but then
Sure.
do you get to like eat that night and then you like compete the next days or something?
Yeah, after weigh-in usually. At a lot of competitions, you can weigh in like the night before, or the day before, and then after
like
that,
binge eat.
Yep, and then after that, pack it all on. You need all the weight you
I
can
would
get.
do the same. I would do. I don't know. Did you ever do the preparation H with a saran wrap to try to
Yes,
make tape?
in the military, yes.
Yep. You would put. It's supposed to like preparation H like shrinks hemorrhoids, right?
Oh
Well,
my gosh.
if you rub it on your belly and put saran wrap around yourself, it shrinks your stomach.
Yeah, so I was a diver in high school and college, but like I remember in high school, the wrestling people cutting weight would like, because it's hot and humid in the pool, they'd bring like stationary bikes into the pool area and put like garbage bags on under sweatshirts and hoods and then like ride the stationary bike and like that's so unhealthy.
Yep.
And a lot of times we think of like weight loss at whatever cost because it will like quote unquote improve your health, and it's like none of this stuff we're doing to pursue intentional weight loss is healthy. It's causing a decline in our health.
Especially when you now add like social media to everything, which is just constantly forcing down everybody's throat. This is what you should look like. This is how you should feel. This
But
is
not
how you
even
should
real,
cook.
just like filtered.
Yep.
Yeah.
Everything's filtered. This is what you should eat every single
You should
day.
look like this person who doesn't even actually look like this in real life.
Like, oh my God.
But what we talked about earlier, at least the pendulum's swinging both ways now. Whereas like before, early 2000s, like late 90s, it was like you have to look like the Paris Hilton, super skinny. You know what I mean? And now the
That's
pendulum's
true.
going both ways. You know what I mean?
That's a
Well,
good
there
word.
was just this article, I don't even remember what it was published in, maybe like HuffPost, that I want to say had like a picture of some of the more curvy people in today's like pop culture. And it said something like BBL, which I think stands for Brazilian butt lift, but like the curvier, like peach bottom, like it said, BBLs are out, heroin chic is back in.
Heroin chic.
Which is like when I was growing up, like Kate Moss, like the runway models, like sunken eyes, sunken cheeks, like big bags under the eyes. And it's like, oh, shoot, I gotta find some heroin. and there's a lot of like in my world, backlash about this article because this article is going to end up causing so many eating disorders. But like we're not in control of our body, like our genetics, and we're not in control of our genetics or our DNA. And so this is getting a little bit off topic, but when thinness is more trendy, which is like bodies should never be a trend.
Right.
But when thinness is the body trend, it's better for like capitalism.
Because of medicine, because of food, because of what?
Yeah, just like selling diets. So the weight loss industry, diet industry, beauty industry, everybody just makes more money. But also then there's another school of thought that it's like against feminism because it like keeps women like almost silent because they're busy pursuing like impossible weight loss instead of like pursuing more important things.
Yeah.
And that's why us guys can be fat. We don't have to worry about that stuff. Anyway, and that leads kind of a little bit to your second question, Brad.
Yeah. My second question.
Oh my gosh, we've only got through one question.
Yeah, right?
One, like 4 hours.
Right. So at what point does eating go from a necessity, like for survival, and then when does it become like a behavior, like a behavioral thing? Because in previous podcasts, you were talking about how eating should become a behavior. So when do you go from surviving, like just surviving, to a behavior?
I want to say like it's both always.
Both always.
Yeah, like eating is always a necessity. And it's always a behavior. So let me try to explain that a little bit more so that like I'll unpack it so the listeners can understand what I mean. I'm going to give another analogy. I guess I just love analogies today.
That's a good
So
analogy.
if we were okay, so there's this like food addiction, right? And I have to say, I'm doing so many bunny ears, like quote unquote, food quote unquote addiction, because in my opinion, we can be addicted to drugs. We can be addicted to alcohol. We don't need those to survive, but like we need food to survive always. Just like we need air to survive. But we never hear, so like we're all addicted to eating, we're all addicted to breathing, but we never hear people say like, oh, I've been breathing too much. I've been being so bad with my breathing. I got to start being good again. I'm going to hold my breath all day tomorrow to make up for like the over breathing that I did yesterday. But we do that with food, which is like a survival necessity we need, but eating is a behavior.
Okay. So that kind of ties into my next question, actually. You talked a lot about like craving, like if your body needs vitamin C, you crave an orange. Or, you know what I mean? Does that have something to do with it, you think? Or is it?
Yeah, so eating like food can become a coping tool. So sometimes like food is comforting. From the moment you're born, you come out and your doctor's like, "Oh, it's a girl, it's a boy." And they hand you to your mom and you're crying and you're upset and your mom like takes you in her arms and starts feeding you. And you're comforted by the food. And not only are we comforted by food from, I'm 39, so for 39 years, I've been being comforted by food, but like that's in our genetics. Like it's in our DNA that humans are comforted by food for 100,000 years. So I just kind of feel like it's impossible to think that we would not ever eat for comfort. Like that food is fuel thought. Like, yes, food is fuel, but it's so much more than just fuel. It's comfort. It's holidays like Thanksgiving, it's could you imagine Thanksgiving without food? Like,
Oh my God.
it wouldn't even be what would be the point?
Yeah, right.
Just the best part about Thanksgiving, my favorite Thanksgiving foods are the cheapest, unhealthiest ones.
Yep.
But
without a doubt.
Food is like celebrations and family and culture and happiness and enjoyment. And like, it's never going to just be fuel and be fuel alone. Like, it's awesome that when we're feeling an emotion, we can turn to food and feel a little bit of comfort. That's great,
crazy.
but we should know like, oh, I'm turning to food for an emotional reason right now. As I'm eating this food, let me notice how this food comforts me. Because food can help, but it can't be perfect. Like it can't just be the perfect quick fix. And like if somebody's struggling with severe depression, well, like, okay, no amount of food is going to fix that.
Right.
So like, yes, we can notice that food can help improve an emotion that we're feeling, but food can only do so much. So that's when we pause and have the awareness of like, okay, I was comforted a little bit, and full permission to eat is like, I can keep eating, but I don't think that it's going to keep improving this hard emotion that I'm feeling, but I can do it, but I'm not going to do it like, I guess, thinking that it's going to do more than it is. So that's when you would kind of pause and say like, okay, I can keep eating. It's not going to keep helping this challenging emotion that I'm feeling, or I can try another coping tool like, I don't know, a bubble bath or phone a friend or all of the other coping tools that we hopefully have.
Well, like my biggest infraction, I guess I'll call it, is that, like I said, I eat out of boredom. Like I have the fridge phenomenon, something fierce. That's just what I call it. That's just when you walk up to the fridge and open it and there's nothing there and you shut it and you walk away. And then like 5 minutes later, you're like, I'm going to go look in there. Maybe my wife just put something in there in the last 5 fucking minutes.
Magically
Yeah, and I open
there.
it and there's still nothing. I do that like 10 times. And I realized I'm just doing that because I'm bored. And every time I'm going to go back, I'm going to make an excuse to eat something else I might not necessarily want or need. So I just started pausing. And then anytime I would do that, I would just grab a bottle of water. And then I would just drink that. And if I was still hungry, I would go get something to eat because I feel like I was just doing that because I was bored.
Right. And boredom is like, falls into the category of emotional eating because boredom is kind of an emotion, and eating is like something to do to not be bored. So just like pausing in that moment, like, oh, maybe I'm not physically hungry. Like, let
Right.
me check in with my physical hunger. Oh, I'm not physically hungry. Okay. All right. So in your instance, it's boredom. I can eat to have something to do, but maybe there's something else I would rather do that could help me deal with this boredom that would serve a better purpose than food.
Yeah. No, and that makes a lot of sense to me, I think, because binging I don't think was the biggest issue as much as boredom was, because like I said, I would just walk around and look for a reason and then walk into the pantry, walk into the fridge, do that kind of thing. Like I did that, I think, quite a bit. But for people that do like binge eat and they continue to eat, my first question was, I was going to look this up before, but I didn't get a chance. Is there like a rough time as far as how long it takes for somebody to feel full when they're hungry?
There's so much that goes into this question.
Yeah.
So not necessarily time, um, but like what we're eating.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there's a difference between fullness and satisfaction. And I work with my clients on, okay, so I love this saying. I can't remember who it's by. Basically, it's saying better than I'm going to say, like, fullness is like of physical feeling, like in your tummy, where like satisfaction is like a mental in your brain.
That makes
And so you
lot of
can be
sense. Yeah.
physically full but not satisfied in your brain. And there's a lot of different things that impact like satisfaction, which could be, was this the food that I was craving? Like, did it taste good to me, or I'm just eating this because like I'm on this diet and this diet says I quote unquote should eat this food, but I think it tastes like cardboard.
Right.
Like it's never going to be satisfying. Or
Eating unconsciously too, right?
yeah, as humans, we know that a lot of times we feel satisfied if we have like a meal or snack that has a balance of like a source of protein, a source of carbohydrate, a source of dietary fat. It doesn't have to be like perfect measured per gram or anything. We know that as humans that really satisfies us for all sorts of reasons, but it like meets our physical needs.
Yeah.
And so when we create meals that have that, we tend to be more satisfied, but also like being mindful and being present with our food, not multitasking, that leads to a level of satisfaction. And there's so many more things that contribute to satisfaction. So, yeah, so I guess just making sure that you have enough food to feel physically full, but then like asking yourself, so I'll use myself as an example. I know that if I eat something that doesn't have like a crunch, like an audible, you can hear the chewing sound, I will typically not be satisfied. So, like, I could have a smoothie, which has like all of the components, and I could
Mm-hmm.
be eating very mindfully and not multitasking. And I could enjoy the taste of it, but I'll still feel like unsatisfied. So, keep opening the fridge, right?
Yep.
But like, then if I go get some chips or just something that I can like crunch, chomp, 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 then I'll feel more satisfied. So, like, knowing that about myself,
Wow.
I can kind of create meals like that. Or some people feel like at certain times, like a lot of times I'll help people like, okay, run through this list. What are you craving? Something cold or something hot? Something salty, sweet, sour, or umami, which is like, I don't know how to explain, hearty or
Yeah.
comforting
Yeah.
feeling. Like, and then, yeah, like what textures, what flavors are you looking for? What temperatures?
But the audible piece too, like it's
Mhm.
the audible piece for you that helped you feel satisfied from eating.
And I've worked with people who they notice at breakfast they don't feel satisfied if they eat something cold. So, like if they had yogurt or a cereal, they wouldn't feel satisfied. So they started making like eggs or a breakfast sandwich, something warm, and then, oh, perfect, I'm satisfied now.
That's pretty interesting.
So
That is
when our
cool.
goal with eating is satisfaction instead of fullness, it's just a little bit different, but like a different mind shift.
Well, it's a mind shift that I don't think I really ever did. as far as like thinking that I'm eating to feel satisfied, it's almost like in my head, I need that end point. And that end point is, like Louis C.K. says in that really good bit, is when I fucking hate myself. When he talks about his eating habits, he would say he would just eat until he hated myself. That's how long, or hated himself. That's how long he would eat for. And like in your head, you're just like, okay, you're just waiting to hit that wall. Then you're like, okay, this is way too much because now I feel sick and I hate myself.
Yeah. But there's some situations where I feel like that's okay. Like, have you ever been to, I think it's Fogo de Chao?
Fogo de Chao
Brazilian.
with the red and yellow or red and green.
And it's just meat, and they just come around with more meat, and then just if you want some more meat, they'll just bring it around, and
then you get the meat sweats though.
Oh man!
And then you also feel like shit.
It doesn't.
I don't know. And now when it comes to the holidays, I feel like a lot of people have issues, myself included, with trying to not put on additional weight. But it's like, one, as I'm even asking that question, it's like, is it necessarily a bad thing that they're putting on additional weight? I don't know. But what do you deal with your clients around the holidays? Like, are they complaining that it's harder, they're falling off things like that?
Because of like our diet culture obsessed society, thin obsessed society, weight gain is viewed as a bad thing. But that is a lot of times rooted in like diet culture has us believing that food is the enemy and that we shouldn't be eating it. So then when we like eat the quote unquote forbidden fruit, the thing we shouldn't be eating, we're not just going to have like, okay, so if you were on some diet and it said don't eat pizza, and then you have some pizza, look, you're not just going to have one piece of pizza. If you hadn't had it for like a month or however long you've been following these stupid food rules, like you're going to have the whole pizza, and then you're going to go down like the guilt and shame spiral, and then like diet starts again Monday or tomorrow, and it's just this like cycle that people are stuck in. So I like to remind people that, like, yeah, it's okay to enjoy food on the holidays. And food is not bad. Food is not the enemy. And also the holidays are not the only time you can enjoy these. Like, you can make green bean casserole any time of the year.
We were just talking about that. We were talking about that earlier.
That's,
like, you
that's
never
not
have
okay.
it any other time. Somebody just walks over and is like, hey, I have green bean casserole. I'm like, what the fuck?
What's wrong with this person?
But that is like food insecurity, thinking that like I can only have green bean casserole on Thanksgiving. I have to eat it all because I'm not going to be able to enjoy this again until next Thanksgiving. Like, of course you're going to go to the point of uncomfortable fullness.
Yeah.
But I also feel like I just did a post on this. Uncomfortable fullness, eating to the point of uncomfortable fullness, which is a little bit different than binge eating. But eating to the point of uncomfortable fullness is a normal part of the human experience.
Really?
Like, that's not a bad thing. You're not a bad person. Actually, food in and of itself is not like a moral thing. Like, we label a lot of foods as like, this food is quote unquote good, this food is quote unquote bad, when like I think of now things that are bad. Like, bad things are like killing someone is bad. Like, selling drugs to a kid, that's bad. Killing a kitten, bad. Like, food, not good or bad, just morally neutral. So when we stop labeling food as good and bad, and so I like to refer to like nutrient dense foods and fun foods and play foods, and we are allowed to have both whenever we want. And when we're like really intuitively eating and in tune with our body's desires, our body like naturally craves a nice balance of both. But so what I like to say as a eating psychology, intuitive eating coach, I help people like these 10 principles we use to kind of help get back in touch with our body after years of dieting. We're all born intuitive eaters, and the culture that we live in like destroys that. Diet culture like ruins that inside of us. So I just help people get back to how we were when we were born. Like, most kids, even babies, they can't communicate with words, but like their mom knows when they're hungry. They communicate that very well. And then like their mom knows, oh, full, done, like pushing the food away, spitting out the bottle. And so like and they've never been taught that like food is bad, or they did something bad and they, should feel guilty about this milk that they just drank as a baby. So they have really good relationships with food. So I just help people get back to how we all used to be.
I feel like the media has to make that super, super, super hard for you sometimes, only because I feel like in my life, I've remembered times where like eggs were good and then eggs were terrible for you. And then like milk was good, milk is terrible.
Yep.
Fats are bad. What the fuck is a fat? Like I've never ate a bunch of fat, I don't think. So what's a good fat? What's a bad fat?
Right.
And like you're sitting there, carbs are bad, carbs are good. You're like, it's so
much
hard.
opposition.
Oh
like
my
literally every food would be like good, quote unquote good or quote unquote bad, like depending on like there is not a food that has never been like labeled as both good and bad by one diet or another.
But it's like I've tried a bunch of other miscellaneous fads, and I tried like the juicing celery for like, I did it for like a month and a half, which I should get an Army Commendation Medal for or something. It is the grossest, because like in what I read, like it could only be a celery. It could only be celery and water and zero other things. You couldn't add apples, pears, other fruit, nothing.
What was it supposed to do? Give you
There's like a
diarrhea?
book about it. What did it do, or what was it supposed to do? There's like a book about, which I thought was funny. No matter what you look into, there's like a cult that revolves around like one food item.
It
That's
is
like
very cultish.
if you just eat just celery, you will gain like superpowers. Like there was this huge thing about all the benefits of doing this.
Yeah, you'll gain superpowers and you'll be like quote unquote a good person.
Right. And I'm like,
we'll put you on a pedestal and worship you.
Yes, and celery is like $1.99 at Aldi. So I'm like, great, I can afford this diet. You know what I mean? It's
But
celery and water. No, I ate other stuff.
Okay.
It was not a celery-only diet. It was just something I was adding, trying to add more nutrients to my diet because I read of all of the benefits of celery. And I was like, I don't have enough celery in my diet, so I could just juice celery in the morning. Mm-hmm. And it was super gross. It was the grossest thing I've ever drank in my fucking life.
I want to share another study. So again, I'm going to butcher this, but like I think it was like maybe like Taiwanese women and then like Swedish or Swiss women, and so like they gave all of the women like Thai food, and the Thai women loved it, and the Swedish or Swiss women like despised it, thought it was so disgusting, and then somehow they did blood work and measured like how much nutrients were absorbed in both of the women, and the Taiwanese women absorbed like tons and tons of nutrients, and then the women, because they enjoyed it, and then the women who like didn't enjoy, the Swiss or Swedish women, they absorbed like zero nutrients, and so they did the opposite. So then they gave all of the women, the Taiwanese and the Swedish women, Swedish food, like I think that's meatballs or something, and at IKEA it's meatballs. Then they absorbed the nutrients because they enjoyed the food, and the Taiwanese women didn't absorb any of it because they didn't like it.
Just because they didn't like it?
Yeah.
Their body was like, yeah, fuck that. We're not going to absorb any of these nutrients.
Yeah,
like, what?
Wow. That makes me question my entire like parenting, just like ever.
Oh my God.
Oh,
yeah.
jeez. I have a lot of explaining to do. Hopefully my kids don't listen to this ever. Oh, boy.
Oh, boy.
It's amazing that your brain can do that based on your just perception of a food, I guess.
Yeah, like pleasure and enjoyment are a necessity, a nutritional necessity.
Right.
So that makes me think of, I did a natural detox for a week one time. So I ate nothing but green vegetables, and I was allowed 3 fruit a day, and it was miserable.
Yeah.
And just thinking about that, did I not get any nutrients in for like a week?
Probably not anywhere close to like what the nutrition that the food had. Like a lot of it just probably passed through.
No wonder why I lost almost 20 pounds. Jeez.
Yeah.
But then how much did you gain back?
Well, so I did that for a week, and then that's when I started the like, my buddy's dad was a bodybuilder, and I did like the high protein, low carb diet for 3 months. And that's when yeah.
Oh, okay. That's when you were saying that you looked like awesome, but your life was not so much fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. That was the week to start it off. We couldn't even. He's like, dude, if you have a headache, no Advil. You have to It's a complete detox. Clean your body out.
Yeah. So we all have like livers that do that naturally for us.
That's a good point.
I mean, it was.
I know, but like I'm sure somebody was benefiting somewhere. Maybe they were selling a book or a juice, or somebody was benefiting.
Oh yeah, and when you understand how much of an impact like marketing and propaganda and stuff has kind of had on your life too, it kind of fucks with you. Like there's a book by Edward Edward Bernays. It's called Propaganda because he was the father of propaganda. And he was the guy, I think it was the Beech Nut Company, had a whole bunch of pork belly fat and they couldn't get rid of it. And Bernays was the guy behind slicing it up and saying that it's good for breakfast. And that's what bacon is. And so, like, you hear shit like that and you're like, what? Like, that's how it started. And you're like, son of a bitch. He did that with all sorts of stuff.
Gotcha.
Like, he got,
I think I've heard of this guy before. He wanted like every single portion of the pig to be like usable, and that there was some pharmaceutical stuff that like came out of it.
I don't know about wanting every single piece of the pig to be usable. I just know that he was the guy you went to when you were trying to sell shit and you didn't know how. And he would be like, we're going to market it as a breakfast food. And he would ask like so many doctors about it. And if he got any doctors to recommend it, he'd be like, doctors recommend, because like 1 out of 1,000 said it was a great idea.
Follow the money.
He got women to start smoking cigarettes because he was shooting all of these ads of women in downtown New York wearing green because he was selling Virginia Slims, I think it was.
I bet they were thin women in the ads too.
Women.
And so then the concept is like, oh, if I smoke cigarettes, then I'll also be one of these thin, beautiful women.
And it was during a time where women's empowerment was really on the uptick also. So these women that were doing that were also being very bold and aggressive out in public. And so people were like, oh, they're associating this cigarette smoking with being empowered.
Okay.
Like it was all sorts of crazy shit.
Dude,
but that was Edward Bernays.
Marketing is such a crazy, just like field altogether. Like that's nuts.
It's almost like sort of in a way borderline like brainwashing.
No, it's fucking for sure that.
Absolutely, it's brainwashing. Like, have you, I don't know if you have kids or not, but like around Christmas time or just throughout the year where any commercial comes out on like Nickelodeon or Cartoon Network and it's like, I want that. And then the next commercial comes, they forgot about the last thing and they're like, I want that instead.
Oh, yeah. Well,
like,
you think about all the game shows you watched as a kid and like their prizes and what they would win and how you always wanted that stuff. Like, did you ever watch Legends of the Hidden Temple on Nickelodeon? Was that before or after either of you guys? Yep. That was a show where like you would compete in all these physical challenges and you could win something from it.
Was that like after Double Dare or before Double Dare?
Around the same time.
Okay.
Around the same exact time.
Okay.
But the marketing piece kind of always freaks me out. But the other thing that's always incredible to me is how much of an impact your environment has around you. So there's a study that I really like a lot, and it's also kind of old, and it was done on Vietnam veterans. I actually talked about it last episode. So the government found that the GIs in Vietnam were having issues with heroin, and they wanted to see how big of an issue it was. So they go over there, they go to Vietnam, they, canvass however many, they talked to however many Vietnam veterans, and they noticed that a significant portion of them were addicted. So they monitored to see what their habits were going to be when they came home after they deployed. They were addicted to the most fucking addictive drug, right? Arguably, heroin. And when they got home, 9 out of 10 veterans, because it was thousands of veterans that they had for the study, but what the percentage that it shook down to was 9 out of 10 veterans quit heroin overnight when they got home. It's crazy to me that they were around it. It was normal. That was the culture that they were in. That's what everybody was doing. So they were doing it. And then they come home and they're not around it anymore. And they just kick one of the most addictive drugs there is.
And they probably don't need it as much like when they're at home. I know it was really hard for like some of those Vietnam vets to come back. But
for sure. But that's what I look at too when it comes to like, I don't know, just how different of an environment, how much of an impact that an environment has on you, your habits, your behaviors. And because me growing up, my culture was Filipino. My mom's Filipino. And so in the Filipino culture, and I was talking to Brad about this, like if you go to a Filipino person's home, they will feed you. It doesn't matter what time of day it is. It doesn't matter if you go to the house at 4 a.m. They're
like their love language.
That is exactly they're going to like, it's 4 a.m. They're going to bring you into the kitchen. They're going to start cooking. They're going to be like, all right, what do you want? Like while they're cooking, like that's how the Filipino culture is. And moreover, and this kind of impacted me a little bit too, younger, if you go there and you turn down food.
Oh, that's like a slap in the face.
Not do that. Like you just take it no matter what. And you're like, okay, thank you. And you just have to.
In the Filipino culture, is like a larger body more acceptable?
I don't think, it doesn't seem like it's frowned upon. It doesn't from my understanding, like I was born and raised here. I didn't get a lot of the Filipino culture other than their emphasis on food being their love language.
Okay.
So I didn't really see too much body shaming or focus on that at all. But my mom, whenever she would get to any party, the one thing she would complain about, she would be like, there's not enough food here. What the fuck? Like, there's not enough food here. And she would sometimes go and just get more food and bring it to other people's parties because she just was disgusted with how little food there was for the amount of people.
Like there has to be more than enough, and you have to be able to send somebody home with. Everybody's got to go home with like, meals and meals and meals worth of food.
It's so great.
I love it.
My grandma was Italian, so it's kind of the same thing, just pasta, and it's like whatever you put on your plate, dude, you're eating, and it's usually like between 8 and 12 pounds of spaghetti. So,
yeah.
That's
And one thing that you'd mentioned was your kind of being a perfectionist and the impact that had with your relationship to food, right? Was that from a very young age? Was that when you like really got into like competitive sports like diving and things like that?
So before I was a diver, I was a gymnast, but yeah, there is a lot of like perfection about your skills as a gymnast and a little bit more judgment on bodies, I would say. And that's like kind of unspoken. I guess unspoken because I remember growing up and watching the Olympics, and there's always that like little bar at the bottom of the TV screen that says like, well, this is their name and this is what country they're from. And it would also say like back in the day when I was a kid, how tall they were and how much they weighed. So there was some emphasis on body size. Yeah, and there's this like unspoken like if like this almost like the smaller you are, that's like an advantage, like a competitive, or you'll be able to compete. Your skills will be better. You'll be a better gymnast, I guess. And maybe that was just a perception that I don't think it's a perception that just I had, but it's not really, at least at my gym, it was not spoken at all. But yeah, I think that perfectionism is a personality trait that we see across the board in people struggling with eating disorders and disordered eating and body image challenges. So perfectionism, people pleasing, and also like a very sensitive personality. And then also with eating disorders, there's always a genetic factor. So somebody in your family either had an eating disorder or like a history of dieting or a similar mental health disorder like anxiety is kind of similar, OCD related. But yeah, I think that perfectionism had a lot to do with being complimented as a child for like excelling, like getting a good score in a competition, getting good grades, like a quote unquote pat on the head. And then like that just, I don't know, is probably like a hit of dopamine in the brain. And like, oh, I'm rewarded with kind, nice words when I do these types of things. And then you hear like, maybe negative comments being made about somebody else and like, oh, I don't ever want to be that person. So I want everybody to perceive me as perfect and I don't make any mistakes.
That's oddly similar in my mind to like my experience in the military.
I would agree with that.
As you were describing that,
Yep.
You know what I mean? And what it creates mentally for you and how that precipitates down and affects all these other things.
Yeah, it has to do with like safety, just like if you're being quote unquote good, or if you look quote unquote good, or you're performing good, whatever, you're going to be accepted more by your peers and like your teachers and your coaches. And that's like a form of safety because who wants to be the one that's like not accepted? Because then you see the kids that are like, not competing as well, or maybe they don't have the quote unquote ideal body getting bullied, and that doesn't feel safe. That's yeah.
And from a mental health standpoint, because I was on the other side of that where I felt like I was doing enough, but people didn't recognize it. So I would get cut from my baseball team, or I didn't start or whatever. So I developed a fuck it attitude, right? Where I'm not going to try anymore. So who cares? So I was on the other end of that spectrum that you were just talking about. And like outwardly, no, nobody knew like what it was like, but internally, I think I'm still dealing with that on a mental level.
But perfectionism is tough because like it's never perfect. Like it doesn't exist. So
Right.
it's like you're constantly striving for something that is impossible to achieve.
Yeah. I don't know. These were all things that I never really thought about that much before, and I just feel like eating psychology as a whole, like, has this just been a practice that has always been, or is this something that people have started to focus more on recently?
Yeah, it's a more new field. So it kind of takes nutrition, which is like a separate field, which is just like information. So like as a nutritionist, a lot of nutritionists, it's like, okay, this food has these ingredients and these ingredients impact your body and your health in this way. So a lot of times it's like you should, quote unquote, should eat these things and you shouldn't, quote unquote, shouldn't eat these things. And that is just information. And so
Yeah.
where there's that disconnect is like, well, eating is a behavior. So information in itself isn't enough to change a behavior. Like just because you know something doesn't mean you can like magic wand. Okay, I'm
Right.
never going to eat these foods again. I'm only going to eat these because like, what if the foods that you should, quote unquote, should be eating aren't the satisfying foods to you? And then the off limit foods are the ones you're going to be desiring because that is creating food insecurity and like unsafety.
Right.
Can you train your body to make foods that once weren't satisfying to you to be satisfying?
Like just, what do you mean? Like just kind of.
So like, for example, so like I am not a fan of oatmeal, right? But it's a healthier breakfast choice.
Okay.
So if I just start eating oatmeal every morning, will I train my body to be like, hey, I kind of like oatmeal?
So like our taste preferences can change. But I feel like, I don't really think that you should try to do, like, if you don't, like, we're allowed to have preferences, and honoring our preferences is like, it's great to honor your food preferences. So if you don't like oatmeal, like, oh my gosh, I'd love to help you find something that you could eat for breakfast that you prefer more because it would be so much more satisfying. So if you had oatmeal, you wouldn't feel satisfied. So like you might keep thinking about food and have a hard time concentrating and feel hungry sooner, and you wouldn't absorb the nutrients from the oatmeal. So even though it's like the quote unquote good thing, it might not be as good for your body. But yeah, I just think like if you don't like oatmeal, no big deal. There's probably tons of other foods that you like, and we'll just eat those instead.
It's still such a trip to me that if you don't like something, your body's just like, fuck it.
Yeah,
Nope,
I
not
can't
gonna absorb any nutrients from
I
that.
can't grasp that for some reason.
It's
Like
so
I'm like,
funny
are
to
you
me.
sure? Like I don't get anything
That's
from this.
amazing. Anyway,
Does that explain? No, never mind.
No.
I was say full corn, like in your poop. Is that is that what that
I
explains?
think that has to do with chewing.
Oh, that's
like
fair.
Lack of chewing.
just inhaling it. You can't just
But
inhale
our
it.
American culture really, we're known to eat fast, like chomp chomp swallow. So like swallowing food practically whole, like, and not chewing it well. So like we have teeth in our mouth, not in our stomach. But when we do make our stomach do the job that's supposed to be done in our mouth, like our stomach's not designed to chew food. So like that can create digestive problems like constipation, diarrhea, heartburn for sure, because your stomach has to create more acid to like break down the food because it hasn't been chewed well. So, and I think that relates to like our always have to be accomplishing, be productive. Like, how are you? Busy. Like, that's my badge of
Yep.
honor. Just like all of the things on the to-do list. Like, let's just not multitask with food and chew well and enjoy the heck out of it, because when we eat food we enjoy, we're so much more satisfied. And then we're done eating and we can do like all these other great things in life, and then we'll get hungry again and eat some more satisfying food. Like, this isn't my last chance to eat the satisfying food. Like, I don't have to eat it all now. The urgency behind eating it all now like dissipates, and like, well, I can have some now, or I can have some more tomorrow, or like more
Right.
in an hour if I don't have to eat it all right now.
What does that remind you of? when she was talking about earlier about just eating as fast as you like chomp chomp.
Oh, dude, boot camp. Are
Boot
you
camp, 100%.
You couldn't look up. You couldn't do it. I will never forget this. You faster, and then if you were done, you put your hands on your lap. You look down, and then you get up and go. We would spend a total of anywhere from, depending how long, like platoons in front of you, anywhere from 6 to 12 minutes in the chow hall at a time, and that's like 70 people.
Oh, because they had to like move so many people through.
Yep.
And the process that's always overarching, which is them trying to break you. So you're just sitting there trying to eat, and they're just screaming, like faster.
And then
so
that behavior with food, like just because you now have more time to eat when you're not in the military, doesn't necessarily mean you like slow down. You can like take that behavior with you.
I was just going to say I'll time myself when I eat, and I've tried to stop myself, but I will just inhale.
I'll eat pretty quick.
And that like stress response, like when you're being rushed so much, like you're in a state of fight or flight, not a relaxation response, like also known as rest and digest. That is not the ideal state for a body. Like bodies are designed to eat in a state of relaxation, not fight. Like think of if you're at war, like that's a very stressful situation. You should be in a state of fight or flight. That's like a form of safety and protection.
Right.
But like it's real. If you are at war and like, you know, fighting for your life, or like if a bear is chasing you or something, like your body's not going to be like, oh, let's work on digesting this food that's in our digestive system. And hey, you're hungry. Why don't you just run right through that McDonald's drive-through? Like, no, your life is more important than and your muscles and your extremities need the blood, the oxygenated blood. And so the blood from your digestive system, some of it flows out to your extremities, like in a state of fight or flight. So.
Yeah, because I think that, you know, when you were, again, talking about all of these things that are like super negative, I'm just like, yep,
boot camp.
Did that, like, yep, that happened for sure.
And my boot camp was worse than yours. I don't want to be like, oh, Marine Corps is better. I mean, it is obviously, but my boot camp was worse than his
because they just fed you crayons the whole time.
And they try to break you down because then like you won't be broken down when it's like a life or death situation. What's the?
I believe so. For me, so like I wasn't, and I'm very transparent and open with like the combat that I was in. I was never in any like Black Hawk Down type of stuff. Everything that I dealt with was usually pretty quick. Like we hit an IED. I was in a gigantic vehicle. There wasn't really any follow up as far as complex attack or anything. And the times that we were involved in any complex attacks, like the firefights lasted for like minutes or something. It wasn't, I don't know. It wasn't anything too crazy, but like. The chaos of that is something that I don't think you could train, but or prepare somebody for. But the closest you could get is having a grown man stand over you and screaming at you to do push-ups every day for like 90 days. Or
so they think they're creating like mental toughness that you will take with you into whatever branch you're in.
I mean, that was the point of the Marine Corps boot camp. They literally break. You can't even refer to yourself as a person. It's this recruit. This recruit requests permission to speak to. This recruit requests permission.
Laughing, but it's not funny. It's sad.
If you wanted to talk to the senior drill instructor, you'd have to pound on his hatch 3 times and recruit Stozic requests permission to speak to senior drill instructor. Blah 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 blah. And then he could say whatever he's feeling. He could be like, no, bitch, go away. And guess what you have to do? About face and go away. And just.
Well, yeah, it's all about breaking. Everything that I dealt with in boot camp was all strictly to break you down and try to make you mentally tough. And do I think parts of that worked? Probably. I mean, as far as like being in combat, watching my guys go through it, like I'm sure that helped us in that they were able to perform the way they needed to perform under like pretty difficult situations.
And also like creating a sense of fear in like your leaders so that like if you're maybe like fearful of them, you'll listen to them. And so like if they're giving you commands, like you're gonna, instead of being like, you know, I don't want to do this, like, because that would, you know, not, I guess, be good in the like to if you're at war and they're saying like we're doing this and you like everybody can't be like we're going on strike.
No, no, that didn't really. Like we almost had a Full Metal Jacket situation when I was deploying. Before I deployed, I was in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and essentially there was somebody in a position of leadership who was just fucking with one of the other guys so bad all the time, and this guy was getting to the point where he was staring at his team leader, who was a E5, a sergeant, and we were just like, hey, I think somebody needs to go talk to him. Like, he does not look okay mentally, the way he's looking at this guy right now. You know what I mean? And you're just like, because they think that it's creating this mental toughness. And again, whether or not that works, I'm not so sure, but I do know with the amount of suicides that happen after guys get out of service, you're just like, okay, well, we can't just look at one thing as far as what's causing this. We can't just say it's because of combat for sure. It's because of this, that, or the other. Like, we got to look at the whole fucking situation as a whole to figure out why it is that such a high number of veterans kill themselves. And it doesn't have anything to do with combat. No. Like, the amount of veterans that kill themselves, more of them are not combat veterans than are combat veterans that killed themselves. So it's just like, so it seems like it would be some things that maybe are creating some, I don't know, unhealthy fucking coping mechanisms or something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, but
that's
like
scary.
after somebody has died of suicide, then it's not like you can interview them and do research on them after the fact. Yeah.
Right. Anyway, well, did you have something to add?
I would say you carry that stuff off from the military, that like what you said about instant obedience to orders. That's the one thing they drill into your head. And that's a blessing and a curse, because I carried that with me, the civilian. And to this day, I will not, if you have authority over me in any position, even if you do me wrong, I will not question it. I won't. I can't. I can't. I've tried. And if I did, it just eats at me, because I know I am questioning authority, and that is not what I'm supposed to do.
That's hard.
I don't know. Have you ever experienced that? I'm not sure if...
I kind of went the opposite way.
Yeah.
Like, I have an issue with authority. Like, after I got out, like now, I'm more now than ever. Like, if somebody is on top of me telling me what to do, that's the first way to get me to not do whatever you want me to do.
Like your little rebel.
I don't know. And it's not that I'm trying to be a rebel, because I wasn't that way in the military. Like, I was a pretty good soldier when I was overseas. As a contractor, I was pretty good. I was never like a tough whatever, but now it just sets me off when people are like trying to tell me what to do. And a lot of the time, obviously, I have to like calm myself down for a second. You know what I mean? But yeah, no, I don't have that now. But it's definitely something that they try to force into you. And the goal for like a lot of drill sergeants when I was there was like to get you to cry, or like just something like that, just make you snap. And there would be, I mean, it's not uncommon to have guys go on suicide watch when you're in boot camp. Like, I had dudes go on suicide watch where some guy was to the point where he was like so done that you and all the other guys in the platoon had to take away anything he could use to kill himself. And he still had to stay at boot camp. He had to stay there so everybody would know that he was suicidal and probably make fun of him for it. But they would take your boot laces and like your belt, obviously your weapon, anything that they thought you could hurt yourself with. And then essentially you were kind of just paraded around. And like, you're like, holy shit.
And then also, like, I never want to be that guy. So like, if I am having thoughts of like, self-harm, I'm going to really keep it a hidden secret.
Oh my God. Yeah. And I mean, I saw that. I had that in boot camp and AIT. I don't know about you. But
so to tie that to this episode, that's how the Marine Corps is with the BCP. They call it the pork chop platoon.
What is BCP?
Like what I was talking about earlier, the body composition platoon, where if you're overweight, where they put you have to PT before breakfast and at lunch and after work and yeah.
I could totally see how like somebody who wasn't making weight in the military is going to come out of the military and then have a lot of challenges with food, like probably struggle with binge eating, probably struggle with like weight cycling, probably struggle with body image the rest of their life, because I call it a body image disturbance. Like we all have, and they happen constantly, but like typically most people have a small handful of like, they remember exactly how old they were and what they were wearing and who said it. A lot of times it's pediatricians for people that I work with. Or doctors in general, but like people making comments about a person's weight, or needing to lose weight, or being made fun of about your body size, or maybe like somebody saying like, "Oh, you have a large appetite," it just causes a body image disturbance. But like then that leads to like a lifetime of chaos with food,
Yeah.
and that's what I help people like break out of.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That is yes.
Well,
we applaud you for that.
We've been going for like an hour and a half.
Oh,
Like,
boy.
we've been kind of going. We didn't even, that's why I wanted to skip past the context. I didn't want to be an asshole, but I was like, I had so many like questions. And you had so many questions and things and I knew that if we got, because there was so many interesting things that I found in both the episode, what did I say, 49? Yeah, episode 49 of the Can't Keep podcast with Jake LaMore, and then the Well Within Reach podcast. So I really appreciate you taking the time to come on
I'll be happy
here.
to come back if we want to finish the conversation at a later date. Yeah.
That would be all. We're trying to shorten some of our episodes because the episodes we have with other where we're interviewing guests tend to go a little longer because we're just like so interested and we have so many questions about things.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? But Brad, did you have any other questions?
No questions. No questions at all.
And Emily, if people are looking for you, how can they find you?
My website is my first and last name, so Emily and then hyphen LaVoie, LaVoie.com. Also pretty active on Instagram, so it's first and last name Emily LaVoie _ eating psychology. But I give everybody a free consultation, and it's all virtual, so I have clients around the world. So you could go to my website, go to Instagram, you can schedule this free consultation like literally everywhere, and we could see if we're a good fit to work together.
Very cool.
Awesome.
Emily, did you have anything else you wanted to add today?
Gosh, I just feel like if you're struggling with food, like everybody's struggling with food. So if you're struggling with food or body image issues, like you're normal and you also deserve freedom and you deserve a life not struggling with this because like there's a life out there that you can enjoy and it's worth doing this work. It's worth making the investment in yourself to make peace.
Making peace is so incredibly important. And from the perspective of myself and what I do within our organization, I work with a lot of veterans that are typically dealing with mental health stuff, substance abuse stuff, all this kind of stuff. And regardless of how many times they've been through rehab or we got them to any treatment facilities, one of the most impactful things or one of the biggest things that it seemed like hurt those guys and set those guys back was like not making peace with themselves about something, not accepting something, fighting something. You know what I mean? So I think it's incredibly important. But that is Emily LaVoie. Before we end this, we always like to end on a high note with like a positive story that we found. And this is one of my favorite ones, and I wanted to share it because it's called the Thanksgiving text, and you guys probably already know about it. But in 2016, Wanda Dench thought that she was texting her grandson to check if he was going to come over for Thanksgiving. And she texted the wrong person. His name was Jamal Hinton. He's a high school senior at the time, and he accepted the invitation anyway. And he's attended her feast every year since. So you guys have probably seen the picture. Essentially, the initial text exchange had Jamal receive a text from Wanda inviting him to Thanksgiving dinner. And when he asked who the text was from, Wanda responded, "Your grandma," and sent a selfie. And then Jamal texted back, "You're not my grandma, but can I still get a plate?" And Wanda said, "Of course you can. That's what grandmas do. We feed everyone." That was in 2016. They got together. They took a picture. It went wild on social media. Every single year since then, they've gotten together to have Thanksgiving dinner. And now Jamal is married and brings his wife over there. And it's like this crazy, beautiful thing where Netflix is allegedly making a movie about it.
That's awesome.
Because of the power of just somebody being super nice to somebody else.
That's awesome.
And I fucking love that story. It's my favorite.
That's a good one.
But to our listeners out there, thank you so much again for tuning into this episode. If you're listening to this on Thanksgiving morning, we hope you have a happy Thanksgiving, and we will talk to you next time.